fence expert. Who's that guy in that orange shirt? Who must be the fence expert? It's almost time to talk about the fences. It's time to discuss operations and expenses. It's time, it's really time to elevate small businesses. It's time for Joe to drop his knowledge, it's relentless. This rhyme of mine is getting a bit ridiculous. Here we go, we're live with Joe. Enjoy the show.
All right, guys, today's interview, unbelievable. You know, usually I'd bring you 2 or 3 little tidbits to tease the interview coming up. I can't find 2 or 3 things. The entire interview is inspirational. We'll go over the differences between being inspired and motivated. I might give you one question just to tease towards the end, or tease the answer at the end. The Star-Spangled Banner, the final punctuation mark, what is it? With that out of the way, let's get straight into the interview with Bobby Batchelor of Seegers Fence and the American Fence Association, and Vann Morris, the keynote speaker for FenceTech 2025. Guys, if you haven't signed up yet, you're going to want to by the end of this interview. The registration link will be in the description below. Let's get into it. All right, guys. First guest today, Mr. Bobby Batchelor, Seegers Fence and the American Fence Association. Bobby, how are you?
Man, I'm great. I appreciate you having me, Jack.
I appreciate you making time. I mean, I won't get into it, but it sounds like you've been having some pretty epic trips lately. So I appreciate you making time to come on.
I appreciate that too. And you know, I'm not bobbing and weaving. I'm not dodging you, but I'm not a podcaster. But on this day, I'm happy. I'm happy and humble to be sitting here.
I'm pleased you made time. I absolutely am. Mommy, so the conversation today is around the keynote at FenceTech 2025, Salt Lake City. It is, if you look close enough, it's right around the corner. I mean, you can almost see it from here.
No doubt.
So I'm excited for it. I know you and I talked about it. It's going to be a heck of a time. Well, one thing I love about FenceTech is the keynote. I think it sets the tone for the FenceTech of the year. I almost leave like a Kool-Aid man size hole out the door after I leave these things. I fired up, just incredibly excited about the industry, about the year to come. I can't imagine what the reaction is going to be this year.
Man, I'll tell you, I come out of those things too, walking a little bit taller, and I know what everybody's in for this year, and I am just on pins and needles with excitement. I mean, I'm not saying that cliche. I say it. I have heard most of this speech probably 7 or 8 times, and I'm telling you, the 8th time hits you just as hard as the first time.
I'm jealous because I've watched what's available online, and I can't imagine being in the room. I mean, it just in my office, I was ready to again run through my office door without opening it to get on this call. I can't imagine being in the room. It's got to just absolutely send it home.
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit real quick. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I was going to say I'll tell you what got us here, but I think that's where you're headed.
That's exact. It's almost like we should do this. How did we get here? Bobby?
Well, I tell you, October 2023. We sponsored an event locally here in North Carolina. It's the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation. And what it is basically conservation and congressional efforts for wildlife advocacy and whatnot. And it's put on by Richard Childress. It's called Wine, Wheels, and Wildlife. And I would ask anybody that's, conservationist, an outdoor enthusiast to look into that and support it. But we went to this thing, sponsored a table. We're sitting there, me and my family, Ben, John, the whole crowd, our wives. And the speaker comes up. And I didn't know the speaker from anything else. We're just sitting there having our dinner, having a drink. And I'm telling you, like 20 minutes later, I feel like my life changed. And we all looked around the table at each other, and we were like, America needs more of that. Like, we are missing that. And Ben actually leaned over and told us, he said, I'm going to have this guy come to Wayne County, North Carolina, and I want him to speak that speech to the kids in the schools here locally. They need to hear this. And look, if Ben says he's going to do something, it's already done. So fast forward to March of 2024. So what is that, 5 months later? Vann and his lovely wife, Rita, is in Goldsboro, North Carolina here at the Fence Company. And they're setting up a 2-day extravaganza, and they go and he speaks to 6 different schools.
Oh, wow.
Public schools. It chokes me up, man, because it's so awesome. Because I went to a few of them and watched it, somewhere where my children go. And I mean, he can captivate an audience at any age. And when you talk about patriotism, there is no age limit. There is no height restriction. There is no limit on how you can impact the patriot, the patriot, just the whole aura about it, and how that just motivates people to want to get fired up and be a better person, be a better American. So let me detract back a little bit. So I went from October straight to March. So on the heels of October, that was the year of my presidency with the AFA. So a month later, after hearing Mr. Morris in Lexington, North Carolina, at Wine, Wheels, and Wildlife, we were at my budget meeting in Rockwall, Texas. And I tell the whole crowd there, I said, look, we're going to stop this meeting for just a moment. And I brought it up on my phone, and I did one of his speeches, and I brought everybody around. It totally just mesmerized everybody. I mean, it was a game changer event for that, and that is what led in to a lot of the people in the AFA circle being introduced to Mr. Morris and what he brings to the table. And then fast forward, I'd say this summer, and we're on a FenceTech committee call, and we're talking about keynote speakers, and they've got options here, and reading bios and whatnot. And I said, wait just a second, we're missing somebody off this list. And so our assistant here, I got his information, and we reached out to him and asked him if he'd be interested. And of course, he was absolutely all in. And so we lifted him up onto the committee, and I'm pretty sure it was unanimous that he is going to be our speaker. I mean, it just goes without saying. And you'll know why. You guys after the keynote speech, you'll know exactly why this has culminated to be what it's going to be.
Well, I'll tell you, just in a few minutes, we've had to talk right before this and watching the video of his biography on his website. I think after this, everyone's going to pretty well understand why he got brought up for the keynote. I just, like I said, 4 or 5 minutes of us talking, I was inspired. And I think that's something to also, we had kind of touched on the difference between inspiration and motivation. Being inspired is entirely different than being motivated. It's a stronger feeling for sure. Now, Bobby, so during your presidency, that was around the time, and I could be off on this, but where the special interest groups really, really started taking hold. Like there's always been conversations, but they really started taking hold around that time. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe it was my president-elect year. I was sitting in an airport, 5 a.m. drinking coffee, and Andrea Hogan was sitting beside me, and she leaned over and she said, "We need a women in Finch." She's like, "If you would be willing to push this thing, I'll help spearhead it." And I told her, I said, "I absolutely would," and I stuck to that, and that beget that into play. I'm not sure. I think Brian Boutte may have been the one to bring Veterans in Fence to the table, and it was rallied around. I mean, just crazily. Brian has run with that pretty hard. We've got the young fence professionals. We've got Hispanics in fence that we're getting relaunched with some initiatives from Jesus. There's a lot of things moving, and it's our way to really, I think, connect the AFA with its members on a deeper level than just saying, "Hey, we all dig holes for a living." I mean, it's
sure.
Deeper than that. It's deeper.
Well, and the reason I bring it up is, so speaking directly to Veterans in Fence, I believe there's a component here, right? The Veterans in Fence also dovetails really nicely into Mr. Morse's story. And as we get into it a little bit, I think everyone will understand exactly how it dovetails nicely. But I've got to think that was probably on your mind as well.
It was, and that whole the Veterans in Fence was a huge initiative, especially during my presidency. Like I said, one of our partners, he is one of our partners at one of our branches, Sean Holland. He has taught several classes. He's an Army Ranger. I mean, he is so involved from that aspect as well. And I think Sean has motivated me to look at that in a different light as well and have a better appreciation for it. It's one thing to be aware of it and to understand it. It's another thing to be close to somebody who has lived that, and it changes that whole dynamic about how you understand and digest that. And that really motivated me as well when Mr. Morris, I knew that he brought that aspect heavily to the table as well. And so I even asked him, I said, while I'm asking, I'm going to keep asking. I really want you to do the keynote speech, and I really want you to walk the show floor and make yourself presentable. And man, if I'm begging, I really, really, really want you to be a part of this Veterans in Fence Special Interest Group seminar. And he was like, yes, and yes, hands down, with a smile. He's just such a great person. It's contagious.
Well, Bobby, you bring up a great point, and something I'd like to talk about at the end is not only, to your point, not only the keynote, but he's also available after the keynote. We'll talk about that a little bit at the end about where else they can interact with Mr. Morris. Because I'll tell you, as soon as they get done with the keynote, they're going to want more. I mean, you could give him the show floor or the keynote for whatever length of time, and I'm telling you, there's going to be people that want to interact more. So let's talk about that at the end, though, is where maybe people can interact after the keynote. With all that being said, it gets a little awkward when you're talking about somebody when they're just right off stage listening to this. So let's go ahead and bring Mr. Morris up. All right, let me do this. Whoop.
Hopefully he wasn't listening to all that good we got, I was saying.
I heard every bit of it. I heard every bit of it.
Like bad news, Bobby. Yeah, he got full access to all of that.
And I'm humbled by all of it.
Well, it's well deserved. It's absolutely well deserved.
Well, thank you guys so much.
So we'll pick up here. We'll pick up here in the edit mark. All right, Mr. Morris. First and foremost, I appreciate you making time to come on. I know gentlemen like yourself and like Bobby are incredibly busy. I appreciate both of you making time to come on.
Absolutely. It's absolutely my pleasure to be here. It's an honor to be here with you and Bobby. And thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. You know, we could talk about accomplishments, but that would really take up the entire show today is just talking about accomplishments. And I mean, the story that I'm familiar with started with recruitment offices that were closed and maybe conversations that didn't resonate, and goes on to submarines, nuclear powered aircraft carriers. It goes on to massive drug bust. And there's a story there that you thought you were almost done. You could almost see the finish line. And then that got extended a little bit.
Oh, absolutely.
Before we get into all of that, rather than get into all that, because that would be the show plus some, why don't we talk about a little bit, if you don't mind, who is Vann Morris, and how did you get to the point where we're introducing you to the fencing community and you're taking the keynote stage?
Oh, thank you so much. Again, thank you for having me out here. I appreciate it. I'm absolutely looking forward to FenceTech 2025, being with the AFA and all the family that's involved there and the friends. And let me tell you, I like to say that I am a country boy. I was born in southern Louisiana, and I'm the son of a sharecropper. So my mother, she picked cotton back in the fields of Alabama. So cotton, corn, and peanuts, that was the thing to do back there in those days. And my family members, my brothers and sisters, I'm one of 16 kids. So my parents had 16 children, and I'm number 13. So I'm very low on the pecking order. So I'm number 13 down to 16. So you can imagine during dinner time, you're that low in the pecking order. It's like dinner time is like a pride of lions after a fresh kill on the savannah there. So you get what you can. But there's a lot to unpack there. But let's fast forward a couple of years there. And I want to talk how all this started real quickly here, just so that you can have a rough idea of who am I. So it really started back in 1968. I had a big brother. His name was Martin. So Martin Luther, he was born in 1968, about 3 months after Martin Luther King was assassinated. And you can imagine there was a lot of trauma in America, and especially in the Black community. So my mother named her son Martin Luther Morris. So, and he was an amazing big brother. And one day, let's fast forward another 7 years. So one day Martin is riding a bike with his brother, his big brother, and they were run over by a vehicle. The big brother barely escaped with his life, but Martin, he received the brunt end of that accident there. So he died on impact. And there's a lot to unpack there. But let's fast forward on 7 years. And 7 years after that, I'm without my big brother there. And I'm in school. I'm in Louisiana, in southern Louisiana. I'm in school. And I was told by one of my teachers that I would never amount to be anything. He said, Vann, you're not going to be any more than your dad. And your dad, he was a bobtail truck driver. And I had all the respect in the world for my father because he was working as much as he could for all those kids, So that hurt me, Joe. And it was very embarrassing because here you have a young man who's in the 7th grade and he's being told by a teacher. And look, we were raised by our parents. You show respect to your teachers. You show respect to all the adults in the community. You answer yes, sir, and no, ma'am. And that's what I did. So moving along there, one of the teachers at the assistance of the principal walks into our classroom. And the principal says, okay, Vann, you, and you guys, let's go. You're going to go help bale hay with the local farmers. I didn't think nothing of it. So I go and bale hay on Tuesdays and Thursdays every other week. Now, I flunked. You know, if you do that every other week for the 7th grade, you will not pass. But I did not attribute that to what had happened concerning baling hay. I just thought it was me and my lackadaisical approach to education. So fast forward another 7 years, for the sake of time here. Now I'm about to join the Navy. I end up joining the Navy, and inside of that is the story that you were mentioning. But I joined the Navy, and I'm in submarines. Now, here I am, submarine school, and for those that don't know, submarine school is one of the hardest schools in the military, right? And I joined the Navy because I was laid off. I was in the San Francisco Bay Area, got laid off, joined the military, and I joined because I wanted to be an electronic technician. Not necessarily that I wanted to put my life in harm's way, but I wanted to be an electronic technician. So I wasn't really a patriot. And I think many people today can understand that. Kids are joining the military, some of which because they love their country, but some are joining because the military is going to pay for college or something along those lines. So anyway, there I am in submarine school, and the proctor, the instructor comes in and he says, okay, guys, listen up. If I call your name, I want you to stand fast. But if I don't call your name, I need you to leave, and you're free to go for the day. So everybody's like, woohoo, we get to get on out of here, right? And so everybody, Joe, everybody's listening for their name not to be called, right?
Right.
So he calls out a list of names, and 12 guys get called, and you guessed it, I'm one of the 12. So I'm like, man, I'm on that list. So the other guys, they leave. They don't even bother to look back to see who was left behind. Those guys were out of there, right? They're on liberty. They're done for the day. So I'm looking around at the other 11 guys, Joe, and I'm trying to figure out, what do I have in common with these people? I couldn't find anything in common, Joe. Nothing in common with me and these other 11 guys. And then I looked again. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. We're all black. I'm like, oh, this is not good. This is in the late 80s, and it's nothing but 12 black guys in here. All the white dudes left. So this is not good, Joe. It's like one of these guys then probably, messed around with a girl in the barracks, and that's a no-no. And she's going to identify one of us. I'm like, man, look, my career is going down before it starts. So the proctor comes in. He says, all right, all of you, get on into the commanding officer's in-port cabin. Look, the commanding officer is an 06. That's a very high-ranking person in the military. And we walked into his office, and he's dressed in his service dress blues, his coat and jacket, button-down shirt and all that. And we're kind of in a working utility uniform. So it's me and 11 other guys. We're all E2s, basically the lowest rank in the Navy. And we are being hauled into the commanding officer's cabin. And guess what? His right-hand man, which was the command master chief, is there too. So this is going from bad to worse. Okay. So I sit there, and there's bleachers. There's like 4 bleachers. So I sit on the 3rd bleacher because I'm one of the first ones in the room. I sit on that 3rd bleacher because I don't want to be up front. Right. Sure. And then everyone else comes after me, but they sit behind me. So I'm still up front. So I'm like, okay, all right. So, and the captain, he starts talking. He says, guys, I got you here. I want you to know something. Your grades are phenomenal. You have great physical fitness scores. Your character has been off the charts. You guys are exactly what we're looking for in a leader. And I'm like, what? I thought this was about who's going to jail.
Talk about a 180.
So you talk about a 180. And he says, listen, you guys will make a great addition to any officer wardroom in the Navy. And he looked at me, Joe, and I could see it pierced me through my soul. He says, and Vann, I would love to have you as an officer in my wardroom. And all of a sudden, boom, Joe, it hit me like in the best way possible. Right there, I became a United States patriot. All that had happened in my past, my amazing big brother being run over deliberately by a car. And the guy that ran over my brother, we found out that he did it because of the color of his skin. And he confessed to that on his deathbed 10 years later. He was a man of God, and he confessed because he wanted to clear up things with God. So he said he confessed to my mother, and he did. And my mother never held that against him or the community or the ethnicity. She prayed for him a prayer of love, compassion, and strength. And all of that, Joe, was forgiven and forgotten. Yeah. What my teacher had told me in the 7th grade, forgiven and forgotten. The principal taking me out of class to go work in Bell Hay, at 7th and 6th period and Tuesdays and Thursdays every other week, forgotten and forgiven. Everything that had happened that was a setback in life was forgiven and forgotten because these two guys of a different ethnicity came to talk to 12 low-ranking black guys. They didn't give us something, but they inspired us. They told us that we can be anything that we want to be in life if we embrace our talents and we embrace our dreams, and we are the best version of ourselves. That is the message. And that is the message I took away, and it changed my life. It created a paradigm shift in my life, and that is why I am a patriot today, bleeding red, white, and blue, and that's why you see that United States flag behind me, and you see the prisoners of war flag right there next to it. I'm on a mission, Joe, to heal America. I'm going from coast to coast, from pillar to post, talking to schools, corporations, nonprofit organizations, churches, sporting venues, anybody that will allow me an opportunity to say a few words about America's common sense, core values. And to make that happen, I have 2 lines of effort. Number 1 is to honor those that serve. And number 2 is to teach our children the value of freedom. So I want to stop right there and get your thoughts.
I'm just going to mute myself real quick and probably excuse myself. I'm done here. You can tap me out, right?
Yeah, thanks, Bobby, for leaving me with that. What are my thoughts? You want to talk about, so let's talk about inspiration and motivation. You talked about that early before we started this. Talk about an inspirational story. Right. So the words of the teacher saying you'd never be more than your father had to stick with you. Right. Yeah. Leading up through the schooling. Now, you say they were forgiven and forgotten, but they probably still stuck with you a little bit. Maybe they didn't have as much emphasis on you, but those had to drive kind of who Van Morris is even today.
Yeah. Well, let me address that head on. Okay, so in all fairness, my parents, they led the way on this. They raised us in a way that beyond reproach. Okay, my mom and my dad, they instilled in us every core value you would expect growing up in America to consist of. So, and that's why I'm on this mission of mine to really reintroduce Americans to America. So, but directly answering your question there, it was truly forgiven and forgotten. And here's why I say that. It's because I had great leadership in front of me. My mother, the way she approached it, I want you to really understand this. Here is a mother. She's notified while she's at church, praising God, she's notified that your son has been killed. So she leaves church and she goes to that scene and she sees the body laying there limp. When that car hit him, Joe, it broke his back, and because of the speed, it snapped his neck. And he went up into the air and he came down, bled out, and he was dead before he hit the ground. And to have a mother to see her son being hauled away in a hearse, that is something that we can only imagine. Okay? So now take that. And this man went for years, for over a decade. We never knew who it was until 10 years later. Here he is. He's on his deathbed in ICU. And he tells the nurse, I need to talk to Miss Daisy. That's my mother's name. And when he got my mom on the phone, he came straight out. He told her, I'm the man that killed your son. Now, and that was supposed to clear it up with God. But then my mother had a question for him. He did not anticipate that. And the question was from my mother, once she cried and got her composure back, she said, "Why did you do it? Why did you do it?" And he had to answer because God's listening. You just come clean, man. Just tell her why you do it. You got 3 days to live. Let's go. So he told her, he says, I was driving my 1970 Lincoln Town car and I saw 2 black kids on a bike and they were trying to cross a road. And I said, as I was driving at decent speed, I'm going to kill me an N-word today. He told my mother that. He told my mother those words. My mother just lost it. She cried, her knees got weak, but she got her composure back. And the next question that she had was, do you mind if I pray for you? And he said, he didn't anticipate that, but he said, please do. And she became an advocate for him because she knew that he waited to the last minute of his life, so to speak, to come clean, which is selfish. Because you knew if you would have come clean earlier, you would go to jail. So you wanted to wait until that wasn't possible. And so it's a selfish move on his part, but he wanted to make it into heaven. We don't know if he made it, but I believe he did because my mother prayed a prayer of conviction and really was his advocate. And when I saw that, I can only imagine, we can only imagine that God, after seeing his daughter speak with such passion and compassion and strength and love, then who am I to do anything shy of that? So when I tell you forgiven and forgotten, I am telling you that I am the advocate of any American out there that believes that their country is not in their best interest. I'm telling you that you won't always have it your way. And you won't always have friends and people that's going to say, hey, thank you for your service. And some of them are going to hate on you some. But guess what? Veterans of every color, shape, and size, they demonstrate sacrificial love. And that's why that flag is draped over their coffin when they pass away. It's not because they are willing to die for their families. They're willing to die for people they don't know. And sometimes it's people that don't like them. So I really want to send that clear and concise message to you that it absolutely is forgiven. And it is maybe not totally forgotten, but the forgotten part is only remembered for inspiring other people to be the best version of themselves. So what you're seeing here, I'm sorry, you have a comment, I think? I thought you had, okay. What you're seeing here right now is a man that I am going to cross political divide. I'm going to cross racial divide, social divide, economic divide, and I'm going to get to the hearts of our kids in America. And I'm going to get to our veterans because they deserve to know the truth about America. And when you know the truth, it will make a grown man cry. And that's what Old Glory is about. It's just simply speaking the truth. You're going to connect with the truth. You just know that it's the truth, and it'll make you cry.
Well, yeah, Mr. Morris, I tell you what, I am so excited to hear the message for the keynote because just this little glimpse, just this little peek into the background and story, it's incredible. And it's your accomplishments. Like I said, we would be here all day to discuss them, but
Thank you so much,
to find a more qualified person to speak on leadership and inspiration, it'll be tough. I don't know. Good luck to the committee for next year because I don't know where we go from here. If you could speak on inspiration versus motivation. We spoke on it before we started recording, but when I say I'm inspired, what is the difference between the inspiration and the motivation type? The difference between inspiration and motivation.
Okay. That is a beautiful question. And let me say it very clearly and concisely. Motivation is emotionally driven. For example, you can have a New Year's resolution and you're driven to accomplish a task or to change something in your life. Now you come back in a week or maybe a month or two, that could have fizzled out. Okay, it all depends upon how you're feeling. Inspiration has really nothing to do with feelings. Inspiration has everything to do with what you understand and what you know. What have you been enlightened that you did not understand before? And now it comes over you like a breeze of fresh air, and you can even breathe even better than before. You feel taller, and you know, and you're confident in where you're going now. It is really a lamp unto your feet and a light unto your path. It will create a paradigm shift in your mind. And when that happens, there ain't no turning back. So that's the big difference. I would like to say that I'm a motivational speaker, but I'm not. I'm really an inspirational speaker. So it's all about turning the light on, getting to see something at another angle, getting to understand that really no one can stop you from being the best version of yourself. Those teachable moments, those golden nuggets of information that will transcend just the normal, happy-go-lucky, short fuse, what we call the flash pan approach. This is not a flash pan. So this is sustained, superior performance that we're talking about here. And that's the difference right there. One is sustained, one is not. One is based on emotions, and one is based on knowledge and understanding. And you see examples set before you, and it's hard to refute that. So that's really what I'm coming after is really, and I want to give you just one quick example. I'm going to give you one quick example. So, and this is going to be inspirational. This is not motivational. So there I was in Cowtown, Texas. I'm there getting ready to perform Old Glory at a Bullfighters Only event there in Cowtown, Texas. That's Fort Worth, Texas. And I'm at a burger joint getting a hamburger right before I go to this arena. So, and I meet a Generation Z young lady. She's about 21 years old, and we get to talking about America. And then, so I asked her, I said, so if you could change anything about America's traditions, what would you change? And she said, well, I think I'd change the national anthem. I said, okay, well, is there anything particular you don't like about the national anthem? She said, well, I just don't think it represents everybody. I said, okay, well, can you tell me, you do know the lyrics to the national anthem, right? She said, yeah, I know the lyrics. I said, well, tell me this. What do you think is the ending punctuation of our national anthem? What does it end in? Does it end with a period, an exclamation mark, a question mark? What's at the end of it? She said, I think it's an exclamation mark. I said, yeah, I could totally understand how you come to that conclusion, seeing that we sing it with such passion and we put such emphasis on the end, but it does not. Our national anthem does not end in an exclamation mark. And it doesn't end in a period. It ends in a question mark. And she said, a question mark? Well, what's the question? I said, well, the question is, oh, say does the Star-Spangled Banner yet wave? Does it? Does it wave over the land of the free and the home of the brave? That's the question. And this young lady said, wow, I did not know that. So she was inspired just knowing that all this time I thought it ended in a period, but probably an exclamation mark. And I said, no worries. I said, now listen, here's the way I want you to receive this from now on. I said, I don't want you to think about the national anthem the same way for the rest of your life. I said, from here on, I want you to receive the national anthem in this manner. When you hear it being sung, when you hear that question being sung, I want you to hear it in this manner. When you hear, oh, say does that Star-Spangled Banner yet wave over the land of the free and the home of the brave? I want you to hear it as a challenge to you. Are you doing your part to keep that banner waving? You don't have to worry about who's burning the flag, who's kneeling on the flag, or who's disrespecting the flag. All you have to worry about is, are you doing your part to keep that banner waving? And she said, I like that. I like that. And I said, so tell me, are you still wanting to change the lyrics? She said, nah, I think we can go ahead and keep it. Let's go ahead and keep the lyrics. You see? So, Joe, that's inspiration. That's changing this lady's life forever. She will never be the same. She's going to now look to preserve the flag and not destroy the flag. When she hears the national anthem, she's going to respect it even more, because now she knows that self-accountability matters and that she has a part in making America the greatest nation on the planet.
Mr. Morris, I can only imagine what it's like just to travel around you. And because these conversations have to occur just regularly. And it's unbelievable. But that's a great point on inspiration versus motivation.
Motivation.
I tell you what, guys, this is what I'm talking about. But, just watching the bio video and talking a little bit before this recording, it's like I'm inspired even before we hit record. I'm ready to go. I can only imagine what that room is going to feel like when the keynote is over and everyone's released to kind of the opening ceremonies of FenceTech. The doors aren't going to be tall enough. To Bobby's point earlier, you walk a little bit taller. I don't know about a little bit. I think there's a lot of folks going to be walking a lot taller walking out of that room.
Well, I'm humbled by your comments there. I appreciate you so much. And I'm absolutely looking forward to it. I tell you, I can hardly wait.
Well, all right, so let's clip it there, and then we'll go to here we go. So we just finished with the walking a little bit taller, which is absolutely the truth.
Did we talk about the veterans in Fence, or was that during the rehearsal? I can't remember.
No, yeah, so we should talk about it here. So because Bobby and I teased it in the very beginning, so now would be a great time to bring Bobby back into the conversation. Now, Bobby, in the beginning, we talked a little bit about all of the special interest groups, but specifically to this conversation, the veterans in Fence. Can you tie this in just a little bit tighter with Mr. Morris's keynote and the veterans in Fence?
Look, I'll weave it in a little bit later, but one thing I do want to roll into this is I've seen Mr. Morris speak to, a bunch of sportsmen. I've seen him speak to, our friends of Seymour, which is our local, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base. It is our committee here that helps support that growth and viability in our local market community. And I've seen him speak to, 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. He touches everybody equally. There is no one that is immune to this message. And I'm going to challenge people at some point on this call to make sure that if you've ever considered bringing your son or daughter to FenceTech with you, this is the one to come to, because when you leave FenceTech, you may not be talking about the latest and greatest gate closure or roller assembly, but you're going to sit at the dinner table and you're going to talk about the keynote message. If you have your son or daughter with you, you will circle back on that conversation. I can absolutely promise you that. And you'll be better for it.
Well, Bobby, I think, I will absolutely get us there, because I think what we'll talk about is, I'll get us there, because I'll talk about that. The message can resonate with everyone. And this is a good room for that, because you've got a mixture of everyone. And then say, but Bobby, I tell you what, not only if we're talking about team members, if we're talking about leadership, if we're talking about ownership groups, not only that, but we're also talking about age groups here, and that I'll get us there that way. Now, Bobby, in the very beginning, or back in the intro, we teased a little bit the special interest groups, or we touched on them a little bit. I think specific to this conversation would be great to bring up specifically the veterans in Fence. Can you guys tie that together a little bit more?
Absolutely. The Veterans in Fence initiative, like I said earlier, was brought forth by Brian Boutte. There was a committee rallied around this. I was part of that committee early on, just through my presidency, and just trying to be involved in any and all things that were going on in the AFA at the time. And that committee was put forth to try to create an avenue for our industry to welcome with open arms these veterans that are exiting their service and basically looking for a home. And, number one, we have a need. But way more than our need is our desire, and our desire to be where you belong. That is a tagline of the AFA. And it's not cliche. It's not something that sounds good or markets well. It's the truth. Everybody and anybody we want to welcome into our industry. That is how our industry grows. A rising tide lifts all ships. And That's the reason we have all of our education seminars, our leadership seminars. Everything that we do is meant to elevate. And SIGs, the special interest groups, are our way of focusing on a little bit deeper connectivity with those special interest groups, being one of them, Veterans and Fence. And just hearing Mr. Morris, the multiple times that I have, luckily, it just resonated with me that all the more reason to have him here. It's almost like the keynote is going to be amazing and it's going to inspire so many people. But I think when Mr. Morris goes home and sits around that dinner table with his wife and talks about, hey, let me tell you about FenceTech. I don't think he's going to be talking about what he said on stage. He's going to be talking about the people that approached him on that show floor walking around and those deep connected conversations that they had, and they almost bonded for it. And I'm just super excited about, what Vann's going to be able to do and love on some of our guys who are they're looking that love that's hard to somebody like myself who's not been in those shoes. I can talk with you and I can walk with you, but I haven't been there, man, and it's not the same. But for somebody like Vann who has been there and he knows what you're going through and he wants nothing but to help you and he understands the path you've been on, it doesn't get any better than that. That's rock solid. And for that reason, had he not been chosen as keynote, I probably would have had to kind of pull rank or do whatever I could do. Go politic and go do something, but it was going to happen.
Well, I'm glad you did. Guys, I think this is a message that resonates. When we're talking about attendees that will be at FenceTech. I mean, we're talking anyone from team members to leadership teams to ownership groups. And I think this message resonates and will inspire all of those groups. But, guys, one thing I think, too, Bobby, you had spoke to it prior, is also across age groups, right? And Mr. Morris, you had kind of spoke to that, too, about, whether we're talking about, millennials or Gen Z. Bobby, you had made a point that I'd like to clarify, or I'd like to bring forward into this, is it goes even further past Gen Z. Right. Like this is a message I think that is quite literally for everyone across all age demographics.
Absolutely. I said earlier that I've heard him speak to a bunch of sportsmen at a big fundraising event. I've heard him speak to committees that, through our friends at Seymour, our local Seymour Johnson Air Force Base Advocate Committee. And I've also heard him speak at several of the local schools when he came down and did that with Vann's directive and guidance. But I'm telling you, it was no less impactful to a 6th, 7th grade kid than it was to a 30, 40-year-old man or woman. My children came home that night and spoke about it. We discussed it at the dinner table that night. It was super powerful. And I could tell that there was it struck something in my son that you don't see very often, and I'm very proud to see, to acknowledge that. And Vann, I thank you for that. I know he wasn't alone and he wasn't special. I would say a huge majority of the kids in that room, were inspired by what you said. And I would challenge, people coming to FenceTech. It's one thing to come. You're going to come for great leadership. You're going to come for great networking events. You're going to have fun. You're going to get a lot of educational type events, but make sure not to miss this keynote. This keynote to me is special. And I would challenge you, if you're ever considered bringing your son or daughter to FenceTech, Salt Lake 2025, this is the one to come to, because I can promise you, when you circle back on it afterwards, Vann being here and the message that he brings, your son or daughter will let you discuss that.
I couldn't agree more. I think, like I said, I think this message transcends not only maybe skill levels, not only just roles and leadership opportunities, but ages as well. Mr. Morris, could I ask you to speak, because we talked earlier about, before we were recording, just about millennials are in the industry now, but Gen Z is really probably who we need to be speaking to as well. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, Gen Z. I start off by telling the kids there, Gen Z. Some of them aren't kids; they're adults, but they're just getting started well, and they come in all type of conditions, flavors, and you name it, right? So I let them know straight off the bat. And oh, by the way, I'm talking to their, if it's in a high school, junior high school, or even an elementary school, or college, or foster care program, or even prison. I mentioned those different groups because I've talked to kids that are in high-risk schools, kids that are, elementary, even all the way down to pre-K, which are your 4-year-olds, all the way up through college. The last college was the University of North Dakota and Florida State University. The next college is going to be the Naval Academy. That's going to be basically a week from today. So after I do the inauguration, I'll do that the very next day. But these kids, I let them all know, and their teachers know, that you are impacting your life more so between the ages of 12 and 25 than at any other point in your life. So the decisions that you're making now as a 12-year-old, a 16-year-old, and a 22-year-old, you're impacting your life more so during those years than at any other point. And I want that to set in for just a second. So when you really address them, you're really talking about, if you wait till after 25, that's a whole different ballgame there. But you can set yourself up for life before that. And that's where the rubber has to really meet the road. So I want to get their attention right then and right there. And when we talk about how to wheel those people into your industry, it's never too young to start. I mean, never too young to start. Al-Qaeda's doing it. The Taliban's doing it. Yeah. They're starting at, really at pre-K. That's where they're starting. So why would I start at high school to try to get people into the fencing industry? I'm going to start before that, because we have to really start playing hardball here. So the millennials, we're going after you, but we're really going after Gen Z, because they really do need to understand that. And I want to give you one point that I have to make dealing with these Gen Z personnel. I'll tell you that the story I told you before about my parents, they instill the core values inside of me. That's true. Mm-hmm. But that's not a message that I can really tell students that are in high-risk programs, because they're dealing with situations to where they're single parent homes, or they're living with their grandmother. And oh, by the way, the grandmother may not know if that kid is going to school or not. He's a junior in high school. Grandma don't know if he's going to school or not. And because of that, the kids aren't going to school. And because of that, your grade point average is now 0.05. It's not even a 0.1, not a 0.1. And what do you think the schools are going to do? The schools are going to look at that and say, hey, we need money. We need to be competitive with the other schools that are out there. And we can't really do that if our cumulative GPA for our school is below the norm. So you're losing funding. So what do? It's easier just to expel those kids, get them off your books. That's not helpful. It may help the school get funding, but it's not helpful to your community. Sure. And that's why I'm so glad that schools are allowing me to come in there. And in the fencing industry, they're helping me to make that happen. So how do we crack that nut there then? Since I can't really talk much about my parents giving me great upbringing and all that, what I do is this route. And again, we're getting back into inspiration versus motivation. Sure. I tell them something that they will never forget, and it will be with them for the rest of their life. I ask the students, I say, so I need to show of hands. I need to see all the students that know who your best friend is. So I get, about 50% of the kids raise their hand. All right, put your hands down. I need to see all the hands, all the kids that know who your worst enemy is. I get about that same amount. Okay, hands down. And I tell them, I say, I know you're thinking that you know who your best friend is. You think you know who your worst enemy is, but I got some good news for you, actually. Your best friend and your worst enemy are both the same person. It's you. It's not your mama. It's not your dad or your girlfriend or your buddy. It's not Timmy. It's you. And this is a fact. This is not me guessing. It's not something I read in a book or someone told me. This is what I know to be true. And I can prove it. You take any given day at home. It's getting late at night. And actually, it's about 2 a.m. You know you should be asleep because you got a science test in the morning. But what are you doing? You're up there watching YouTube videos. Now, you know good and well you don't need to be watching those YouTube videos. Okay? You need to get ready for that test. Mom doesn't know this. And neither does your buddy. But you know, the best friend knows this. Okay? You know you got a PT test in the morning, but you're eating that Twinkie at 4 a.m. Really? Seriously? Okay? Nobody knows these things. Only the best friend knows this. Okay? And the same said for the worst enemy. If your mother told you, son, I just don't think that college is for you. I think you need to consider some other things. Now, you probably could go past that and prove her wrong. But if you tell yourself that you're not going to do a trade, you're not going to do formal education, you can put a fork in that. It ain't going to happen. So the true worst enemy is you. And it just so happens that Generation Z, that suicide is the number 2 cause of death. And veterans is the number 1 cause of death. There's nobody that's going to take you out quicker than yourself. The true worst enemy is you. So I want kids to know that if you want to be the best version of yourself and reach those goals, the best friend will help you make that happen. Just like the worst enemy will end it all. So the military can tell you better than I can. We lost 30,000 service members just about from 2001, that's 9/11, all the way up to 2021, that's 20 years. During that same time span, we lost just about 6,000 service members due to combat or training for combat. Now, you do the math on that, you're looking at roughly 5 times the number of service members that died at their own hands versus those that died in combat or training for combat. So what that tells you is, who's the real worst enemy? Is it Al-Qaeda? Is it the Taliban? Is it ISIS? Or is it us? So that's the message to kids, to let them know your real best friend and your true worst enemy is yourself. That's another way of saying self-accountability. When I put it that way, it takes away their excuses to blame their teacher. It takes away their excuses to blame the parents or the lack of parents. So they want to play the victim role. Woe is me. I didn't have 2 parents. I can't get things done. No. Embrace your talent. Embrace your dream. And be the best version of yourself. If you do that, you will level the playing field. It doesn't matter if Timmy's dad is rich and your dad is not rich. You're embracing your talents, embracing your dreams, and you're the best version of yourself. You've leveled the playing field. So when I do that, that inspires them. Now they're thinking, this isn't motivation here. I'm creating a paradigm shift in your mind. You'll never forget who that best friend is, and you'll never forget who that worst enemy is.
Guys, I hope you're getting what I'm getting. Just again, there's going to be a me-sized hole right outside this studio as I leave this interview. You guys are getting a sneak peek into what this keynote is really going to do. And I think it's important to know that it's not going to motivate you. It's going to inspire you. Just from this synopsis, it's guys, I can't tell you how excited I am for this. If you had any thoughts at all about coming to FenceTech, I hope this seals the deal. I hope this motivates you or inspires you, to get to FenceTech. Even if you're on the fence, you ought to find your way to FenceTech. Now, Bobby, we talked a little bit ago about that Mr. Morris will also be available outside the keynote. And you'd also mentioned that him taking conversations back to his dinner table about, stories that he heard or people that he met. Where can those conversations happen outside of the keynote?
Well, when I asked Mr. Morris if he'd be interested in speaking to us, I felt like I needed to ask for everything, like IWIA. I want it all. So let's start there and let's see where we land. So I said, I really would love to have you speak at the keynote. I said, and then because of the Veteran in Fence SIG initiative, I'd really love you to walk the show floor and make yourself available and approachable for those that want to come up and have a conversation with you. I said, and then on top of that, can I pretty please ask for you to also speak and be part of the Veteran Defense SIG, the seminar?
Yeah.
Of course, he was yes, yes, and yes with a smile. Glad to do it. So yes, you would be able to find him either in the AFA booth. He will be walking the show floor, but I think he's going to try to concentrate near the AFA booth, and he'll also be near the Eastern Wholesale booth, who is the sponsor of the keynote speaker this year. They were so motivated. I think that seed got planted at that budget meeting when Sam Williams was there with me, and he saw the video and he was like, I got to know this guy. I need to know this guy. So Sam was so motivated that he talked Eastern into being a sponsor of this keynote. So he'll be there and he'll be at the AFA booth, and then he probably would be walking around as well, and at the Veterans Defense Seminar.
Yeah. So guys, make plans to attend, and obviously I would suggest attending the whole week. Me and the team are flying in Monday. We're flying out Saturday. You might even make it a longer weekend if you're in Salt Lake. You want to explore Salt Lake City. But I absolutely understand that some folks, that's not a reality. That's not a possibility. So I would still say get in Monday, weather delays or not, whatever withstanding, so that you're there Tuesday. One, for education, starts Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. Two, you can see the kickoff party, the Pickets and Peaks that kicks off Tuesday. And to be darn sure, you're there on Wednesday to sit in on the keynote and to see the show floor. It's a great way to spend 3 days, 4 days, however long you've got. I mean, prioritize being there Wednesday is I guess what I'm trying to say, is make sure you're giving yourself time to get there, and be sure that you've got a seat in the room to be at this keynote. Now, one thing, let's clarify, Bobby. So if you've got access, if you have access to the show, you have access to the keynote. Is that right?
I'm pretty sure that now it's open access. We can get that confirmed.
Very good. Very good. So be sure you're there. This is a message you're going to want to hear. Like I said, you will leave this room inspired. The doors couldn't be tall enough leaving this room. I promise you. It's going to be a message. And after you hear the message and you want to have a word, AFA booth during on the show floor, Eastern Wholesale booth, the Veterans and Fence part of the SIG meeting after hours are great places to meet Mr. Morris, interact with him. Like I said, make plans to attend. This is a year that you will not want to miss. Mr. Morris, Bobby, I appreciate you guys making yourself available. I know time's tough to get to, especially this time of year when everyone's hustling to get everywhere. So I appreciate each one of you making time available to come on.
Absolutely, brother. Hey, Joe, thank you for having me. Thank you very much, Bobby. And I look forward to seeing you guys very soon at FenceTech 2025, Salt Lake City.
Very good. Guys, I promised you an inspirational interview, and I can't speak for you, but I can speak for myself. I feel like we delivered tenfold of that promise. I'm sure you guys are fired up as much as I am. I am inspired to be there at the keynote. I will not be missing it. I'm sure at this point you won't be missing it. If you haven't registered yet, the registration link is in the description below. For now, Joe Everest, the Fence